This is the CNC Router Tips Podcast, episode number 12. This is the CNC Router Tips Podcast, a show which answers one question from you, the listener, about CNC router tables, CNC software, hardware, web hosting, and business. I'll help you get started in your CNC hobby or business and help you cut through the confusion.
Today's episode is sponsored by themakersguide.com. The Maker's Guide. Useful tools for makers.
Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of the CNC Router Tips Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Griggs, and I'm so glad that you took the time to listen into our show and learn about CNC router tables. I mean, you could be doing any number of other things with your time, but you chose to spend it with us, and we're really grateful for that. Now, this is a fairly new podcast at the time we're recording this. We've been around for about 2 months. We've got 12 episodes out there, including this one. We're still in the new phase as far as having our podcast on iTunes is concerned. And one of the way that iTunes measures how well your podcast is doing is they look at how many people have downloaded your episode, how many people have listened to your episode, and how many people have taken the time to write a review or to rate your podcast. And so the other day we were looking at our statistics for the CNC Router Tips podcast, and in our category, which is software and how-to in the technology section, we were rated in the 5th place of all the new podcasts that were out there. And there are hundreds of new podcasts out there. And we were in 5th place, and I'm really happy about that. And I would hope that if you like this podcast and you get good information from it that you can use, that you would take the time to go in and rate and review our podcast in iTunes. I'm leaving information on how you can do that in the show notes to make it as easy as possible. It's not an easy process to figure out, but I'll give you step-by-step instructions. Any help you could give in this regard would be greatly appreciated. Thank you very much for making us number 5. Today's episode came to me by form of email. Most of our episodes, someone leaves a voicemail for us, but this person chose not to, and I can understand that. Sometimes you're not comfortable speaking and hearing your voice in these situations. So I'm just going to read you his email. It's from Marlo Swedzinski. And he says, "Thank you, Bill. I first located you with your CNC Router Tips podcast. And I'm not really interested in verbally asking a question. I'll either ramble on or I'll stutter and stammer too much. So here's my thought of what I want to know. For us beginners, can you do a software review of the difference between some of the starter software? What do you get with one? What don't you get with another, etc.? Is one a prerequisite for another? For example, do you need V Carve Pro to use Cut 3D?" And then Marlo goes on to list the CAM software that he was interested in. And he lists Vectric Aspire, V Carve Pro, V Carve Desktop, Cut 2D Pro, Cut 2D Desktop, Cut 3D, Photo V Carve, and then he asks what the difference is. Thank you for that question, Marlo, because it's a very good question, and I'm sure it's one that a lot of beginners share with you, knowing exactly what it is that you're getting and paying for, because buying CAM software, and CAM stands for computer-aided machining in case you're new and do not know what that means. But when you buy this CAM software, it's not an inexpensive investment. You know, and you kind of want to know what each one does. So I'm going to try and simplify matters. We're going to just talk about the Vectric software right now. Vectric is the company that makes the software that Marlowe is considering purchasing. There are two pieces of software that I'm going to save for a little bit later in this, and that is Cut 3D and Photo V Carve, because I think they kind of muddy the water a little bit. And so if we have time in this episode, we'll get to that. If not, we'll do it in another episode. But there are three basic software packages that Marlowe could buy. He could buy Cut 2D, he could buy V Carve, or he could buy Aspire. Now, all of those packages except Aspire come in either a Pro version or a desktop version. And so just to give you an idea of what the difference between a Pro version and a desktop version is, the desktop versions are designed to be absolute beginner software. They give you a minimum set of functions, and they limit the size of the project that you're going to be working on to 24 inches by 24 inches. For those out there in the rest of the world who use a metric system, that's about 610 millimeters. So along with only being able to cut smaller projects with the desktop version, they also limit some of the functionality that you get with the software that you would get in the Pro version. And so before we delve any deeper, let's just describe what Cut 2D does. Cut 2D is the entry-level program that Vectric puts out, and it, in the desktop version, costs $149. If you're using Cut 2D, you can make anything that is two-dimensional. In other words, if you wanted to think about what that is, imagine a puzzle piece from a regular puzzle. It has an outline that's cut around it that fits in with other pieces. That is the type of flat work that Cut 2D will do. Or another example would be the monograms that you see on a lot of the doors. The fancy letters cut out. You can do those with Cut 2D. Along with that, you can also do what's known as pocketing, which is to remove a portion of the material from the top of a piece without cutting all the way through. That's a pocket. So it's an indentation carved into the top of a piece. So with Cut 2D, you can do what's called profile cutting, which would be the example of the puzzle piece, or you could do something like a coaster that you would sit on a table and use to hold your beverage of choice, so that you don't get water stains on the table. Now, most coasters have a little pocket carved in the top that you can set your glass down in, and it'll prevent it from tipping over. Well, that's an example of something you could do with a pocketing toolpath in Cut 2D. You can also do drilling operations with Cut 2D. Now, I mentioned that you were limited to cutting projects that were 24 by 24 with Cut 2D desktop, but there is tiling built into Cut 2D. And tiling will allow you to break up a toolpath into multiple parts, so that you would be able to cut a portion of the project and then move the wood and then cut the other portion of it. So you could actually cut something that's bigger than your desktop size machine. So that's built into Cut 2D. Now, all of this software that we're talking about will also let you take in an image and trace it to create vectors. Vectors are what are used by the software to generate your toolpath, or to tell the mill where to go and where to cut. That functionality is built into every one of these pieces of software. Now, the differences between Cut 2D Desktop, which we just described, and Cut 2D Pro are a couple of added features, and one of them is nesting. And nesting is a pretty advanced function, which will allow you in Cut 2D Pro to arrange several pieces to be cut and have the software automatically determine where they should fit on the worksheet. Instead of you manually moving each piece around individually to get them just right, you click and drag on top of all of the parts and then go through the nesting command, and it'll automatically array these pieces out on your workpiece preview so that you can cut it, and you can set parameters for that. But that is one very handy feature if you're making a lot of the same parts. Another thing that Cut 2D Pro will allow you to do is to cut parts larger than 24 inches by 24 inches without using the tiling function, which can be very handy. And it also allows you to create Toolpath Templates, which is a pretty advanced feature, which allows you to set a specific cutting bit with a specific depth one time in a project and then reuse that over time, so you don't have to enter all of these numbers and settings in again. It uses the template as the example and just sets everything up for you. Now, each of these pieces of software, the Cut 2D Desktop and the Cut 2D Pro, V Carve Pro and V Carve Desktop, and even Aspire, all have the same basic graphical user interface. So they all look the same. Each one, as you progress up the scale, has more features in their tool set. So anything you learn how to do in Cut 2D Desktop will apply if you decide to upgrade to V Carve Pro or Cut 2D Pro or V Carve Desktop or Aspire. So that's very convenient. You only need to learn this system once. So moving up this scale to the V Carve series, it's the same kind of thing with the desktop and the Pro version. You're limited in the size part that you can cut to 24 inches with the desktop version of V Carve. What V Carve will let you do that Cut 2D won't let you do is it will allow you to import a 3D model that was created in some other software into your project and cut that out. It will import lots of third-party 3D models like STL objects and that sort of thing, but one at a time. You're also able to import and assemble Vectric clip arts. So you can buy 3D models from Vectric and just import them right into your project, and you can use as many different 3D objects as you want. You can do what is called slicing, which allows you to take a 3D model and to break it up into multiple slices horizontally, and then you can reassemble them later into a much larger full three-dimensional object. It'll allow you to do 2.5D V carving. In other words, that's V carving with a depth to it. A good example of that is the signs that you see out in front of a lot of real estate places or banks. You can do a V carve, which is done with a V-shaped bit. You know, it's a pointed bit, and it leaves a channel that is sloped on each side with a straight line down the middle. It's a very nice feature and very nice way to make some money, actually, making V-carve signs for people. So that's essentially what V Carve Pro, V Carve Desktop brings to the fore. It allows you to do V carving because you can't do V carving in Cut 2D in either version. Now the Pro version of V Carve adds a few other things, such as the ability to do nesting, true shape nesting, which the V Carve Desktop does not do. Okay, it will also allow you to cut parts that are larger than 24 inches, and it'll allow you to create toolpath templates. There are also a few other things like fluting that are in there, and fourth axis toolpath creations like rotary wrapped toolpaths. And then that brings us to Aspire. Aspire is the flagship of the Vectric line, and it is a 3D modeling and sculpting software. In other words, you can create 3D objects with this software, and you can manipulate them in any way you'd like, and then machine them. So Aspire, is pretty much everything that you could think of that you would want to do. You can do with Aspire. It does everything that all of the other versions before it, the V Carve Pro, the Cut 2D. It includes all of those features. In addition to that, it'll allow you to create lithophanes, which are kind of a three-dimensional picture that you cut it in deeper depths to reveal different shades. So it's very photorealistic. It looks just like a photograph when you light it. One of the things that people get confused about when they're comparing V Carve Pro with Aspire, when you're looking at the website, it indicates that you can do 3D machining with V Carve Pro, and that is true. However, you can't create 3D sculpting modeling with V Carve Pro, but you can do it with Aspire. V Carve Pro will only import a 3D object. It will not create them. Now, there are a lot of things that Aspire will do that I haven't mentioned yet. So I'm just going to buzz right through them really quick. I mentioned that you could do a 3D object, but you can also do 3D model slicing. You can do 2D model designs with the drawing tools. You can trace the vectors. You can do 2D machining and pocketing, profiling, drilling, and inlays. You can do nesting. You can do engraving. You can do prismatic machining. You can add textures, toolpath fluting, wrapped rotary toolpaths, 3D previews, realistic multicolored 3D toolpaths, tile toolpaths to cut in smaller sections if you want. You can cut parts larger than the 2 foot by 2 foot. You can do toolpath templates and toolpath merging. You can do lithophane creations. So there's a lot there. From a pricing standpoint, you're pretty much getting what you pay for when you look at these things, because Vectric prices their starting software, the Cut 2D desktop, at $150. If you want to move up to the Pro version, it's $450. And V Carve Desktop is $350. And the Pro version, V Carve Pro, is $699. And then Aspire is $19.95. So each one of these progresses up the in price as you add more features. But here's the unique part. If you buy Cut 2D Desktop for $150 and then decide that you want to move up to any of the other packages above it, let's say Aspire is the top end, Vectric will credit you your $150 purchase towards the purchase of Aspire. And so you would subtract that amount and pay the lesser value. So it really doesn't matter where you jump in. You're not really penalized if you decide that you need more features. What you bought was still a good deal, and you receive a discount for upgrading. So there's a clear path. You can increase your software as your sales increase. So you start out small, build your business up, and reinvest in your business and get better software, and just repeat the cycle until you, have the best software out there. So that's one thing to consider. Now you ask about, Marlo, two other pieces of software, which is Cut 3D and Photo V Carve. Cut 3D will allow you to import a 3D object and to machine it on multiple sides. It'll generate multiple toolpaths to do that. Okay? And it's about a $300 package. Photo V Carve will take a photograph and convert it into a carving. And that's all it does. And it's $150. You do not need any other software to run Cut 3D or Photo V Carve. They're standalone software. So this begs the question, which software is for you? And that really depends on what you are trying to do. If you just decided to go out and buy an entry-level CNC router table and you want to just test the water, then you probably want to start with a Cut 2D, either the desktop or the Pro version, to see what it's all about. If you're a little more serious or have a bigger, heavier duty machine and you want to try and generate some income, then maybe V Carve Pro or V Carve Desktop is what you're after. If you are seriously considering doing regular business, making projects with a CNC router table, then Aspire may be the software for you if you want to do three-dimensional work. Dimensional signage commands quite a price when it's done professionally. So an investment of $2,000 for software may be a trivial consideration for somebody who's going into the sign-making business. And when you consider that most of the competing software that does this sort of thing may be 5 to 6 times as expensive as Aspire, it's a very good value. So that's just my personal opinion, and I hope it helps you make your decision easier. I realize I just threw a lot of information at you on this, and I think that I would like to give you a way to make this easier to analyze and to comprehend. One way you can do this is you can go to the Vectric website and look through their website for information on their comparison chart, and it gives you a chart to describe the features of the software. If you don't really have a good grasp on how the software operates and what it does, that chart might not be helpful. So I'm going to try and put together a little sample of what each type of feature looks like. And this may take me a little while to get to, but if you'd like to get a copy of that, I'm going to leave a link in the show notes that you can go to sign up to be notified when that's ready. Okay, and that would be cncroutertips.com/comparison. Look, I know all this can be confusing, so if you're still having some doubt about what the software does, leave me a question at cncroutertips.com/askme, and I'll do what I can to help you out, wade through the software and to see which one is a best fit for you. Now, just so you're all aware, I am a licensed Vectric reseller. So if you want to talk about the software, or if you want to buy some software, I can help you out. But I will try my best not to sell you on software. I'll just answer your question and you can make your own decisions. Thanks for your question, Marlo. You'll be receiving a email contact because your question appeared on the show. You'll be receiving a free gift.
Today's episode is sponsored by The Maker's Guide, creator of the Triple Edge Finder. Get the edge you need, save time and frustration on your CNC project, and make setup a snap. Save time and material. Set up your workpiece on your CNC router table faster than ever. Accurately set your Z-axis height first time, every time. Automatically locate the corner or edge of a workpiece. Repeatably reset your starting point in the middle of a program. Quality crafted right here in the USA on US-made CNC machines. Get the edge you need today. Go to www.themakersguide.com/edge. The Maker's Guide. Useful tools for makers.
I often mention many different types of software during the episodes, and hardware and cutters, and it can get a little confusing. So what I did was I put together a page on my website, cncroutertips.com/resources. And on that page, I list all sorts of resources there, from books to tools to software, all the things that I use that make my CNC experience better and easier. And I hope you'll check it out. So again, it's cncroutertips.com/resources. Now, if you'd like to have your question featured on the air, here's how.
Need help?
Ask me about your CNC router question on my podcast, the CNC Router Tips Podcast. I'll be glad to help or try and get you the help you need. I want this podcast to be a fun and personal experience for everyone and helpful. So let's keep it real and ask sensible questions. Please use common sense and show courtesy to everyone. That way everybody wins. Here are some guidelines to ensure that your question is qualified to be featured on the show. Please keep your questions under 1 minute in length. If it goes a little over that, that's fine, but don't ramble. If you have a website and URL, you're allowed to share it, but only once during the recording. Spammy or disrespectful or deeply private questions will not be considered for the podcast. If you need to ask more than one question, just make each question a separate voicemail. Thanks again, everyone, for tuning in and listening to the CNC Router Tips Podcast. If you'd like to join our free mailing list, you can go to CNCRoutertips.com, and there's a link right there on the top of the page which tells you how to do that. Thank you so much, and have a great day.